Welcome to Peaceful Prosperity with Oliver Manalise. I am incredibly grateful to be joined today for our client spotlight, Glenn Poulos. So great to have you. Glenn is a husband. He is a father of five. He's a sales expert. He's the award-winning author of Never Sit in the Lobby, filled with so many hilarious sales stories. He's a speaker, a business coach, co-founder of Gap Wireless, really like a serial entrepreneur, started, built, grown, sold businesses for decades, and just such an inspiring man that I had the opportunity and privilege of working with. Glenn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks, Oliver. It's great to be here, and thank you for such a wonderful introduction. That's awesome.
Tell us a little bit about where you're at right now. Tell us about how would you describe who you are and what you do now, because you've evolved.
And so it's always funny how I would characterize myself. So continuing on my journey as for sure, but I had for the longest time I sort of defined myself by the business that I had started 15 years ago, which that business came out of let's say the implosion of my other business I ran for 15 years, which was acquired, and then the new owners of that business was a public company. They basically ran it into the ground, and we all lost our jobs. I was an employee at that time and a shareholder, and the basically the money that I had made from the sale was all in the form of shares, and the shares went to zero, and I went from being a multimillionaire to being broke overnight and had to restart 15 years ago. That was when I started Gap Wireless, and for the next 15 years, I defined myself as being the G and the P in Gap Wireless, right? And the A was the vowel that I had to buy in order to make a word, right? Yeah, because my middle name is James, and Jip Wireless just didn't have the same ring as Gap Wireless, right? And so yeah, so then my partner and I have a business partner. We sold the business in February, and we agreed to
Woo!
yeah. Yeah. So it's my second 8-figure exit. This one I'm hoping to keep. No, but we are working with a very, very reputable and proud to say, this company out of Washington called Grain Management is the private equity, and they're very, very well known, and very well thought of, for their diversity initiatives, their ESG, environmental social governance programs, and they're very present day company, right? And so I'm happy to align ourselves with them. But I agreed to stay on and run the business and other businesses that they acquire for some period of time, and so now I'm an employee and now I have a boss, right? And I report to a guy in the US, and it's quite a different change, right? So now I'm not sure, do I categorize myself as an employee, or, you know, I still sort of feel the way I felt all those years running that business. So kind of the entrepreneurial spirit, and, because we're still growing the business in that, with that kind of a way, right? And, but, in the last few years, I've realized that I was still not attending to some of my health issues in terms of my weight and fitness and things like that. So for some reason, that always fell to the back burner for me, and so this year has been one where I've been trying to get that under control, and it's probably the biggest challenge I've ever met. The business ones I seem to tackle a lot easier, but getting in shape and losing all the weight has been the biggest challenge of all, probably, which I'm definitely still working on it. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's sort of where I am today. I'm an employee, still a father of five, still married, and and still working on working on Glenn 2.0, as I like to say, right?
Oh my goodness. What a journey. Like when you sum up what the last 15 years have looked like for you or and beyond, it's pretty incredible,
Yeah,
because it makes me think of like, whoa, it's almost like a rags to riches to rags to riches
it is.
story.
It's
Like
exactly what it is. Yeah.
what a freaking
Yeah.
cycle. What do you think it took? Because I feel like, I've gone through this, some maybe micro versions of this
Yeah.
cycle. People who are listening to this go through their own struggles before triumphs and back to struggle again. What do you think really stands out to you when you look back of like how, what kept me going? What made me think that I can do it again, or I can exceed what I've done before? Because I feel like you really have to have an entrepreneurial spirit to be like, I think I can make this work again, like I think I can do it even better.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, I have multiple answers to that question. And the real long and the short of it is, when I realized that the shares they had given me, which there were millions of shares and worth millions of dollars in the beginning, but within 18 months, it was worth nothing. And, but I never held that money in my hand, right? So, I mean, I was always paid as for the business that I ran, I had a salary and a wage and stuff. So I always had my bills paid. It wasn't like I didn't eat or anything like that. But you accumulate this sort of paper wealth, and you stare at it. You're an insider. You can't sell it because you have to wait a certain amount of time. And so I just it was sort of like a kind of like a badge of honor that I had this wealth that at some point I'd be able to sell and cash it out or what have you. But I never really got to absorb it into my lifestyle or anything like that, right? So it was kind of nebulous in a way. So when it evaporated, what also evaporated was my salary. And so that's what really spurred me on, was the sense that, wait a minute, like, yeah, the shares are gone, what have you, but also so is your earning, your living, right? And you have a family to take care of. And so as I've shared with you in some of our discussions over the years, right, one of my biggest fears was always the fear of being poor, right? And I admit it quite regularly, and people are like, that's your biggest fear or whatever. I'm like, well, yeah, pretty much. And and so I was just spurred to massive action in the face of fear, right? Like, I can't remember, fawn, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, right? And whenever at work things are heading towards maybe a economic uncertainty or whatever, my immediate reaction is, let's just do a lot of things, right? Like, let's just go do some things, like make a bunch of more sales calls. Let's find some new customers. Let's add some people. Not, you want to manage expenses and limit investments that you're making during troublesome times like the ones we're in right now, right? The economy is definitely shifting, exchange interest rates, and the exchange rate. But this is where I'm most motivated to take action. And so I had everything ripped out from under me, and I had two choices. I could either start over or get a job, right? And if you go way back 30 plus years when I started that company, you realize that I never really ever applied for only one job, right? And so I didn't know how to write a resume. I didn't know how to get jobs, go on interviews. To me, it was actually easier to start another business than it was to get a job and go and like pound the pavement on interviews and stuff, right? And I had learned a bunch of things about working with customers that I wanted to change in the other business, but it had gotten so big that it was hard to make those changes. And I thought, if I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it this time. I'm going to name it after me, and that's what I set about to do. And so, people are thinking, oh, like, you deserve all this credit for taking this action, but really I was just reacting the way anyone would react in the face of fear. And and that's the way my actions were pointed, was towards that sort of entrepreneurial, restart the business, go back, get the customers, win them back, that kind of a thing, right? And it was a natural inclination for me.
Wow. And bravo for taking that massive action in the face of fear. And I think we could all learn a huge lesson about that when it comes to the times that a lot of us are in, where where you are forced to kind of grow and build and expand during a recession period, during a challenging period. The first business I started was in 2008 in the real estate business. So it was like we
Right.
were right in the middle of it too. And I think you can definitely learn a lot. You can learn about your own resilience, how much grit you have. But also it's just like, well, okay, well, you have this fear of going broke, but if you look at your track record, if things go, downwards, you have the ability, you have the capacity to act and create something from nothing that's going to be a huge bet on yourself, but also be incredibly rewarding. So I acknowledge you for that. That's huge. I think that's incredibly inspirational for so many of us.
Thanks, Oliver. Yeah, thank you.
So when we started working together before, like
Yeah.
before the pandemic,
Yeah, in
and
2019. Yeah.
yeah, what would you say it was back then that motivated you to connect with me? Like, give us a little picture of what was going on, what led you to us working together.
Well, yeah, I had this. I'm still working on it, so you have to forgive me that it's not like I'm done, right? But
No, you're
I
never
had
done.
I had this goal of Glenn 2.0, right? And we talked about it back in 2019, and I had I had I think shared with you some of the things that I pointed at being the elements of Glenn 2.0, which and one of them was the book, right? And I mean, there's the book there. I shamefully plugged my book, right? But
No, that's what this is
yeah,
for,
yeah. And whenever
to
anyone
celebrate you.
and whenever anyone teases me, like a lot of my coworkers and the Americans are always teasing me about, oh, we should check with the author up, because they're just kind of teasing me in these meetings, right? And I'm like, excuse me, but I'm an international, multiple award-winning author. I'll have you know, right?
Correct them, yeah.
Yeah, it usually it usually gets a pretty good laugh, but so I started this quest that I knew there were things inside of me. I didn't really know how to get them out, and I wanted to change. And some of them were, relationships, professional, this creative thing about feeling like I had this book and working towards wanting to be in the area of public speaking. And at that time, of course, I'd already tried to sell the business once. The timing wasn't really right. So those are very complex things to sell a business. It takes time, and you have to have the timing correct, right? And so I probably had just come out of that and heading and realizing that that capacity was there. Wanted to, shape the business for the next up at bat, right? And get it right and knock it out of the park. And those were sort of the reasons why I felt I needed to you know I just sort of in my mind said, what should I do? And I somehow came up with the conclusion that I was going to hire a coach, right? And happy to say that I worked with you, and I got a lot out of it. And and I can't remember exactly how I found you, but I think it was sort of a combination of the fact that you had this former real estate angle to your story. And you were out there on social media and Google and what have you, and I once I spoke to you, I knew that the fit was good, right? We started working together, right? And some massive changes started occurring very shortly thereafter as well, which I can share a few.
Well, yeah, I remember distinctly in the beginning, you were sharing with me, like there were just things that you knew needed to be done, but you
Yeah,
weren't doing it. There
right.
was just something holding you back. And
Yeah,
what I really enjoyed about that was just because I think half of the time we were on our sessions, we were laughing.
yeah,
And I'm like, this is great. Like you can be in this position of like, what am I do? Like, what do I do next? Like how like why am I so stuck? But you're still like your humor is there. You still have that levity in you. So I quite enjoyed the fact that you can still introduce some humor into like what
yeah,
what for in many moments was a very arduous journey for you.
yeah, it was for sure. Yeah, the I didn't really openly to talk about it too much, but during, shortly after we started working together, one of the tough decisions I had to make was relative to the business and the size that we had gotten to in my business. And you had helped me, through our discussions to figure out uh, to give me the strength to make the changes that I needed to make, right? And to put it, to capture it in, in words for people to understand. We'd grown to, a team across North America and the US and Canada. We had multiple divisions we'd opened up, and we thought we were going to, knock them all out of the park, as I like to say. But, the more you stretch yourself thinner, the less time you spend with everything, right? And I had to make a decision one day where basically I reduced the business from 80 people to 29 people in one day. And it was a series of 2 divestitures, which I had, and then laying off some people. But if I hadn't have done that, we were down at we were heading down a dark path. One of the divisions was losing a lot of money. It was people intensive, and you'd given me the strength through our discussions to show up to work one morning. It was a Monday morning, and I said to Mark, these are the changes we're making. And he's like, oh, when are we going to do that? Like, because it was so big, right? Basically gutting the company by more than half. And I said, it'll be done by noon. And of course, swallow hard, right? And and we pulled it off. Of course, and every one of those people got a job. I'm happy to say many of them we kind of transferred or sold those divisions. I use that term loosely, sold, because I mean we didn't so much as give them away, but we came up with a commercial arrangement which was not highly profitable for us, but which everyone landed on their feet, and they were in the right homes to do to where they needed to thrive themselves, right? Out from under, and we were allowed to focus on what we do. We went on in 2020 and throughout the pandemic to perform record profits, mind-blowing, turnaround that I'd never dreamed was possible. And then, of course, in 2022, after the 2020, 2021, and a little bit of 2022, have an amazing exit liquidity event, which would never have happened if we hadn't have made those hard choices that, in 2019, that I came to while working with you. Yeah.
Damn. I'm so proud of you, Glenn. Huge.
Thank you. Yeah.
And what's so beautiful and what stands out to me was I just remember you knew what you needed to do for a while, and I think you had decided to do it long before, and you were just kind of in your own way. And I think part of the work that we did was to just start getting you out of your own way and start looking at the thing that you had been avoiding. Like, we know we need to do this maybe for the last 6 months, 18 months, I can't remember what it was. But you knew, you have the high level strategic mind and thinking to know what the path ahead is. And all it was just you starting to own it. And I think when you owned it, it showed up as, we're doing this by noon. And all of that right before things fell apart during the pandemic. Positioning you for an exit. Bravo, man. Couldn't have happened in a better way. So cool.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
What would you say were some of the, I think that's a major accomplishment. That's huge. Are there any insights when you look back, any aha moments that really stand out for you?
Well, the thing that I always like to share with people is that and I already said it sort of once on this call, but was, in the face of adversity, do something, right? Just do something, right? And people are like, well, what do I do? And I go, do anything more than nothing, right? And nothing is not an object, right? Like Netflix, and so going home and watching Netflix all night, binge watching your favorite show, that's not something, right? That constitutes, that lies in the area of nothing. You have to, I'm not saying you have to work 18-hour days. I don't mean it that way. I just mean don't freeze, don't fawn, right? And don't flight, right? You gotta fight, and you have to have a fight in the game or whatever. And a lot of people, they get right up to the starting line, but they don't, when that bell of adversity goes off, or, they don't actually take the action, but someone does. And that's who ends up becoming the winner. Right. And so it's, take action. And then the other thing is, people often do comparisons and things like that. Right. And I always heard a great saying, comparison is the thief of joy, right? And but I always explain, look, you don't have to be that much better than the next guy, right? Like if you've watched any race, when the guy's chest is running through the ribbon, like 3 millimeters behind his chest is the next guy. You only need to be 3 millimeters better than the other guy, right? And that's all you need. You just need to be a little bit better. You just need to do one little bit more thing than the next person. And that's what sets apart, the person that's really going to thrive and survive, right? Is do things, right? If I can say it that way, right? As in do something, and always try to be just a little bit better than everyone around you, right? And that those are the principles that I guide my day on today, right? Like what's the next best thing I can do, right? And how can I do it a little bit better than everyone around me expects? So that when it comes time for other things to present themselves, you become a logical choice, someone to go to for that particular subject matter, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's so good, and I think when it comes to like during that time together, it was really uh, you getting back into action, you getting back into execution mode, and played
yeah.
such a huge role in your momentum. What would you say are some of the challenges that you faced during that process of our work together that you overcame and worked
Yeah,
through?
so some of the challenges that I've, I guess, worked through would be my like fear of being good enough and those kinds of things, right? They're probably fairly natural but I mean, you know, do I deserve it? Am I worth it? Can I do it? Those kinds of things, right? And then you know, uh the one thing that sort of stands out at me, the area where I did not sort of thrive throughout the pandemic, right, was I never really nailed the health and fitness part of basically all of my bad energy in terms of how I wanted to shed it, because I don't drink and I don't do drugs or anything like that. Went into some poor choices in the form of diet and fitness choices throughout the pandemic, and I'm still trying to, as I'm 60 years old now, right? So it every year it gets harder and harder to shed the unwanted pounds and stuff, right? So the other challenge is that is making sure that you stay balanced in your approach as well, right? And so people would say, oh, you must be so happy you sold the business and you have this money and whatever. Well, and but one story I tell was that I'd ordered a very expensive sports car as when I found out that the business was being sold, right? And I thought, oh, I earned a sports car, right? And it was $160,000, and
What was it?
it was the Lotus. It was the new Lotus. It's the last production combustion engine production Lotus Elise from Lotus that they were going to make. The next ones will all be electric, right? And so I pre-ordered it, and but I ended up canceling it because I had epiphany during the delivery. Everything in the pandemic took forever, right? Thankfully, and to this day, right? But I realized that the car wasn't going to make me happy, right? That the car doesn't make you happy, and the money won't make you happy. Sure, you might have a great trip that makes you happy or whatever. You can buy an experience here and there, but you can't be on a trip every week, right? You know the uh, but you know the I had to realize the things that do and don't make me happy, right? And simple things like continuing to have a good work ethic, you know, um, you know, getting up every day and like I say, doing the next right thing, right? Those are the things actually
Mm-hmm.
that make me happy. And even continuing to work on a business that I don't own anymore makes me happy. Providing for coaching and helping my family to do better, the kids, help them to excel and become gainful and employed members of society, right? Which I spent a lot of time on. Those are a lot of the challenges that I've dealt with. But personally, the challenges with me are always, my inner fears of being enough, having enough, and being worthwhile, and and fighting through those to get to the next, the next phase, right? And that's probably the biggest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's that means a lot that you're sharing so vulnerably about that, especially because I think when any normal human being looks at a successful entrepreneur, a multiple award-winning author, someone who's had multiple exits, and then you're willing to just be courageous and be really human and say, "Hey, I struggle with not feeling like I'm enough."
Exactly.
I'm just getting goosebumps just kind of reiterating that because it just makes it okay. I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of us, no matter what kind of work we're doing, if we're entrepreneurs, high achievers, whatever it is, and we have this public facing image and we look good, and like, yes, we are powerful teachers, we're guides and we're movers and shakers, but it doesn't mean that deep down we don't have these challenges and these issues. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you
Really, really
shining light on
funny,
that.
really funny story I could share quickly with you, which is very brand new. One of the events, like one of the experiences when you have the money, I bought a VIP trip to the Grey Cup. Um, on the weekend with my wife, right? And it was a crazy experience where we were there for multiple days. We got to meet the coaches, we got to meet the some of the players, we got to go to the locker room, all the events. We met the chairman of the CFL, the commissioner, I should say. We got to be on the field for the beginning and the end, the halftime show. We were right up front. It was just VIP the whole way. And so we were at all these events, and there were the many players, former and present, were at these events, basically mingling with the people that bought this experience, the premium CFL experience, right? And at some point, you got to remember, these are football players, and the most of them are like, I'm 5'6", right? Most of them are like 6 inches, 8 inches taller than me, right? So they kind of all looking around, and I'm kind of like looking up at all these guys, right? And the and many of them are very accomplished athletes and what have you, right? And of course, my story's not really relevant in the middle of a sports, a finale, where the Argos are competing for the Grey Cup, right? So I'm not going to be like bragging about my business or anything like that. So I was probably more on the quiet side, but at some point someone said something and it was kind of like related to my height or whatever, right? And I'm standing around these like 6 foot something, football players and MVPs and what have you. And I said, yeah, I said, I guess maybe if I need to even it out, I can just stand on my money, right? And,
Oh my god, that made my side hurt just laughing
yeah.
at that.
Yeah, and it was just perfect timing, right? And someone was trying to make it, because people often kind of, they joke at me about my height or whatever, right? Which, it's is it appropriate? No, but I guess it's a easy one to pick on, and most people, they get away with it, right? And so yeah, so I came up with that little quip, right? And yeah, it was I enjoyed that. So
Oh man, I
um
think you might have like a side career doing stand up, just with like real life
yeah,
stories that actually
yeah,
happened.
right. Yeah, for sure.
I love that because it just it goes to show that where we all have our own levels of accomplishment and
Yeah,
things to be proud of, and to compare them is not, like you were talking about earlier, it's kind of not a fair
right.
comparison to make, because
No,
where someone is strong, another person is weak, and they're
yeah,
weak, but they're strong in something else,
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah.
What advice would you give to the people listening, entrepreneurs, business owners who are considering doing this personal growth, self discovery work?
So that's easy one. The what I had found was I was not an experienced coached person up until we started working together, right? It wasn't a part of my vernacular, wasn't part of my vocabulary of business tools. I didn't get coaching, I didn't have coaching. So it was kind of and in my back of my mind, I kind of felt like I needed something like that. But and I had all these things, pent up in me, like that I wanted to accomplish, right? Like the book and selling the business, dealing with some of the personalities within my business, and they were like just on the like on the tip of my tongue, for lack of a better description, right? And they were all right there within my grasp, but I couldn't grab onto them, right? And the 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 coach is the guy that's going to help you to grab onto them and bring them across the finish line. And other people that I know, other professional, like mainly maybe people that I work with, like coworkers and like business associates that I talk to, and I can see that they sort of need it. Like I kind of see there's sort of two camps that I put them in, sort of that they know there's a problem and they have somewhat of a sense of what is required to fix and work on these problems, but they don't need no darn coach, right? Like and other more colorful and descriptions of I don't need a coach, right? And then there's the people that are willing to take the chance, right? And so if if you're struggling to hit those goals that you are within reach, but you're not sure why, I mean, that's where the coach is going to come in and bring out the difference between the two. Because everything that I've accomplished in the last few years was I had on my little list going into the coaching, I had none of them accomplished. I went through all the coaching, and a couple of years later, now I'm struggling to find things worthwhile to put on the list, right? To accomplish next, other than my, as I like to point out, my fitness journey, which is still there. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would say to people is that, if you can see them and they feel like they're within your grasp, but just out of reach, that's where the coach comes in and can really help you. They're not going to invent, the structure, the financial structure of the exit from your corporation, or they're not going to, at least the kind of coach that you are, they're not going to sit down and start telling you to like do more push-ups and sit-ups or whatever. They might tell you to work on your fitness, but I mean, you're not a fitness coach, right? And but the coach really draws out what's already in you, right? And allows it to become real. That's what I would say.
Wow, man, I appreciate that. That's so beautifully said. Tell us about what you are up to now, and you shared a little bit about what you're doing, but tell us about what you're excited about, the projects that are in front of you, what to look out from, what in terms of the work that you're doing. You're very active on social media, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Tell us about what's going on.
Yeah. So the I'd wanted to aspire to sort of becoming the manager of the Canadian, all things Canadian, of this group of companies that I'm involved in, and I was able to be successful in that. And and as my wife likes to say, so you got it, so you're happy now, right? Because now I'm a bit more busier than ever, and I can't really do some of the more passionate things I'm more passionate about. It's a great job, and I'm excited to have it for a few years. And but it's not at 60 years old, it's not going to be my forever thing, right? I mean, but what I've realized is that, yeah, buying things with money or whatever just does not move the needle for me. And where the area where I get the most joy from is as I like to say, the sound of my own voice, right? I love public speaking. I love public speaking, and I love sharing my stories, and I like to do it in a way where I can think up these little funny twists to a basic element very quickly, right? And as now I've learned to make them G-rated, so I can now tell them in any audience, right? Well, when I wrote the book, there was, I said you needed 75,000 words, right? And so I wrote 75,000 words. I wrote 2,000 words every weekend until it was done during the pandemic, right? And then I hired this editor. I sent it to the editor, and she like says, you can't say the F word that many times in one book. And I'm like, no. I go, that's the way I talk. And she goes, no, you can say 3 F's, 2 dams, and maybe a shit or something like that. But that's it, right? And I'm like, okay. And so then she sent the book back, and I said, okay, 71,000 words, that'll have to do it, right? So
4,000 words were all F words.
Yeah. But yeah, and pretty close. And yeah, she was kind of shocked, right? And I was just speaking the way I speak, right? And but yeah, no, I love finding opportunities like this podcasts and other kinds of. I've been finding sort of some community events to speak at, but I've realized that there's a distance between here and there. So now I'm just preparing myself to, quite honestly, to be, uh, if I can be vain, but to, if I stand on stage, I want to look okay, right? So I'm working on that, getting to a place where I feel comfortable on camera and things like that, but also where I'll have the time to spend developing that. So in a few years, I'm trying to find events here and there that I could speak at to build a bit of a pedigree, and then maybe spend a few years at the end, touring a bit and doing some public speaking. And I found that I love that new sport, pickleball. So then I'll just drift off into the sunset and play pickleball, on the weekends and stuff after that. So that's basically what I have planned.
Glenn, man, so proud of you. So excited about what you're working on. You being on stage, people reading your book, you sharing your knowledge, using your voice, F's and all. I think, I mean, it's a much needed, refreshing take on business, on sales, on entrepreneurship. And like I said, with all of that wisdom being able to be absorbed in all these different ways, I think it's going to help so many people. And I really like to, like, I love seeing you being on this path where
Oh, thanks.
you're serving in your company in this way, but also you're still finding ways to serve in other ways, being on podcasts, speaking on stage. And man, I'm so stoked about where you're at and where you're headed.
Oh, thanks, Alan. That's
Congratulations,
great.
man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the
Glenn,
opportunity today.
tell us about how we can follow you, how we can
The
find.
easiest way is all my links are on my website. It's glennpoulos.com and GLENNPOULOS.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, and different sort of take on each one. Instagram's more about trips to the CFL, and LinkedIn's a little more about business and business leadership thoughts and stuff like that. And Twitter's a little of everything. So but I've tried to be active on all of those. And yeah, and I'm happy to speak to anyone that wants to reach out. Don't be shy, and I'll answer you, and and engage and collaborate in some way if it's possible.
Amazing. And you're absolutely on fire on LinkedIn, I'd
I'm
say.
working on it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
such, like, I'm following your lead when it comes to that. It's so well done.
Oh,
Glenn,
thank you.
thank you so much for being here with me today and for your willingness to share your story, the struggles, the triumphs, all the lessons. You're such a natural teacher. I mean, you're taking all of your life experiences, things that you've gone through, that you've had to earn, and you're telling it in such a way that we can all absorb it and we can all,
Oh, thanks.
follow through on those insights. So
Oh,
thank you for being on the
yeah.
client spotlight today. It means so much, Glenn.